It started with a knock at the gate, loud, aggressive, and totally unexpected. I was out back working on the fence, minding my own business like I do most days on my ranch. Peace and quiet, just me, the animals, and open land. But that knock? It wasn't a neighbor dropping by or a delivery. It was two police officers. They said they were sent by the HOA. Problem is, I'm not even part of an HOA. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe a mix-up with addresses or some new development down the road. But the officers were serious, asking questions about unauthorized structures and violations. I was standing there in muddy boots, holding a hammer, trying to wrap my head around what was happening. My ranch is on private land, completely outside any HOA boundaries. I've never signed anything, paid dues, or agreed to their rules. So why were the cops at my place acting like I broke some neighborhood code? As I dug deeper, things got stranger. The so-called HOA rep who filed the complaint? Never met them. Their name didn't come up in any official documents tied to my land. But somehow, they had convinced local authorities to step onto my property, armed with nothing but false claims and a whole lot of nerve. That's when I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Someone was overstepping, and I wasn't about to let them push me around on my own land. I've always kept to myself, respected my neighbors, and lived free. But when someone tries to enforce rules that don't apply and sends law enforcement to intimidate you, that's when you have to stand up. What happened next? Well, let's just say they weren't expecting me to fight back. And they definitely weren't ready for what I found out next. After the officers left, I sat on my porch trying to make sense of what just happened. My ranch is on 5 acres of land, bought it fair and square years ago. No HOA, no neighborhood association, just wide open space and peace. That's the whole reason I moved out here, to get away from all the red tape, the petty rules, and people trying to control how you live. So how did I end up with an HOA sending the cops to my front gate? I started pulling out every document I had, deeds, maps, surveys, anything that could prove what I already knew. My property is not, and never has been, under any HOA. I even called the county office, and they confirmed it. My land is completely independent. No HOA jurisdiction, no governing board, nothing. That just made things even weirder. If the HOA had no legal power over my property, then why were they so bold? Why send officers with bogus claims? The next day, I drove into town to ask around. That's when I heard a few rumors, nothing solid, just whispers from folks at the feed store and gas station. Apparently, there's a new HOA president in a nearby community. Word is, she's been on a bit of a power trip, trying to clean up the area. Even properties that aren't technically part of the HOA have gotten warning letters or visits. One guy said she tried to fine him over a barn he'd had up for 10 years. Another said she called code enforcement on a neighbor just for leaving a trailer parked out front. It wasn't just me. Something bigger was going on. Someone was crossing lines they weren't supposed to and using HOA authority like it was a badge. But the part that really got under my skin? This person thought they could scare people into following rules that didn't even apply. And that's when I decided, I'm not letting this go. I spent the next few days doing some digging, not just into my own property records, but into the HOA itself. I found out the community next to mine had recently expanded its board, and that new president I kept hearing about. Her name was Lisa. From what I could tell, she'd only been in charge for a few months, but in that short time, she'd sent out dozens of warnings, complaints, and even tried to call in zoning violations on places miles outside her jurisdiction. I started hearing from other folks who'd had run-ins with her. One older couple said she reported them for having too many chickens, even though they were way outside the HOA line. Another rancher told me she flagged his fence color as non-compliant, even though he'd built it 10 years before she even moved to the area. The more stories I heard, the more it felt like she was trying to draw some invisible boundary around all of us. like she believed she could enforce her version of neighborhood standards, even where she had zero authority. It wasn't just annoying, it was unsettling. She was acting like she ran the whole region, and no one really knew why she was getting away with it. Some said she had connections with someone on the local zoning board. Others believed she was bluffing and counting on folks being too scared or confused to push back. But the truth is, most people just wanted to be left alone. Not everyone has the time or energy to fight City Hall, or an overreaching HOA president with a clipboard and a chip on her shoulder. Meanwhile, I noticed a strange car parked down the road more than once. No plates up front, windows tinted. Could have been nothing. Could have been someone watching. That's when I realized this wasn't just about property lines anymore. This was about control. And if I didn't stand up, who would? Things really started to heat up after I filed a formal complaint with the county. I included everything: maps, legal documents, statements from neighbors. I even added photos of the officers at my gate and copies of the fake violation notice I never should have received. The clerk at the county office looked at me like I wasn't the first person to show up with that kind of complaint. That only confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't just one isolated incident. Lisa had been overstepping for a while, and people were finally starting to push back. Then, out of nowhere, I got a letter taped to my front gate. No postage, no return address. Just a typed warning telling me I was in non-compliance and needed to remove all unauthorized structures immediately. Thing is, the letterhead said it was from the HOA, but it had no official seal, no contact info, and again, I'm not even in their community. This wasn't just annoying anymore. It was personal. Someone had come onto my property and tried to scare me into submission. I set up a few trail cameras near the entrance after that. A couple nights later, around 2 a.m., one of the motion alerts pinged my phone. I checked the footage, and there it was. Same car I'd seen down the road, parked for a few minutes near my fence, lights off, before turning around and driving off into the dark. I couldn't see who was inside, but I had a good idea. Neighbors started getting nervous too. A guy 2 lots over said he spotted someone taking pictures of his tool shed. Another woman down the road got a notice about landscaping violations, even though she lives on a dirt road with no maintained sidewalks. It was like a wave of intimidation had swept through the area, and Lisa, or whoever was behind this, was getting bolder. At that point, I knew this wasn't going to go away on its own. Something big was coming, and I had to be ready for it. Just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, I got a call from the county office. The woman on the line sounded confused, almost hesitant, and said she needed to verify some changes that had been submitted regarding my property zoning. My heart sank. I hadn't submitted anything. Turns out someone had filed paperwork claiming part of my land was now within the HOA's extended influence zone. That term alone made no legal sense, but somehow it had made its way into official records. I asked her to send me copies, and when I looked through them, it was clear someone had forged the documents. My name was spelled slightly wrong, the signature didn't match mine, and there was no witness or notary stamp. But still, it was enough to raise red flags at the county level. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was someone trying to rewrite the rules, using bureaucracy as a weapon. I started digging into the HOA's public records and board meeting minutes. That's when I found something buried deep in a PDF, an agenda item labeled Boundary Clarification Proposal. It had passed with a 3-2 vote just weeks earlier. And guess who introduced it? Lisa. But here's the kicker. The proposal mentioned my property by name as being part of an advisory zone, whatever that meant. It was like they were creating their own map, pretending the HOA could reach out and slap rules on anyone they wanted. As if that wasn't enough, one of the board members who voted against it suddenly resigned a week later. No explanation. I reached out to him through a mutual friend. What he told me off the record? He'd started getting threatening emails and even found a dead bird in his mailbox. Said it wasn't worth the trouble. That's when I realized this was bigger than just one power-hungry HOA president. This was coordinated. And if they were willing to forge papers and intimidate board members, who knew what they'd try next? I knew I had to act fast before things got even more out of hand. So I gathered every piece of evidence I had: trail cam footage, the forged documents, the strange letter, statements from neighbors, and the HOA meeting notes, and brought it, all to a property rights attorney in town. She took one look at the stack of papers and said, "This isn't just shady, this is illegal." That was the moment it all shifted. I wasn't just some rancher being hassled, I had a case. And they were in serious trouble. We filed a formal complaint with the county and alerted the local media. A small news outlet picked up the story, and once it hit the internet, things exploded. More residents came forward with their own stories: unauthorized fines, threats, bogus notices, even attempts to charge dues to people who never joined the HOA. Turns out, Lisa had quietly been pushing her expanded influence agenda for months, and most folks had been too intimidated or confused to fight back. A county investigator got involved, and within a week, the forged documents were confirmed. The car that kept showing up on my property? Traced back to someone on the HOA board. It all unraveled quickly after that. The board was suspended pending investigation, and Lisa, well, she vanished. Stopped showing up to meetings, deleted her social media, and left her house overnight. Rumor is she fled to a different state. No one's seen her since. It felt like a win. The county cleared my property, confirmed I wasn't in any HOA, and even issued an official notice blocking any future attempts to rezone my land without direct consent. But just when I thought it was over, I got one last piece of mail. No return. Address, just a single page. Typed. It read, "This isn't over. You just slowed it down." That letter's now locked in a drawer. Cameras are still up. And every time I hear a car slow down near my fence, I wonder, who else was involved? After everything that happened, life on the ranch slowly returned to normal. The county wrapped up its investigation, and several board members resigned quietly, including the one tied to the mysterious car. They never pressed charges publicly, but I heard there were sealed complaints and a civil suit brewing. As for Lisa, no one officially confirmed where she went. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. But the message she left behind stuck. With me, not just the letter, but the idea that some people will go to extremes for control. I spent the next few weeks reconnecting with neighbors, making sure they felt safe and informed. Some of them had lived here for decades and never dealt with anything like this. We agreed to stay in touch more often, share info, and stand together if anything like this ever happens again. That alone brought a sense of peace that hadn't been there before. Funny how something so stressful ended up bringing people closer. The barn, the fence, the animals. They all kept me grounded through it. That's what I love about living out here. No HOA, no power plays, just honest work, open land, and freedom. This whole mess reminded me how easily that freedom can be threatened when people think they can rewrite the rules. It's important to know your rights, protect your land, and speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. So yeah, the HOA sent cops to my ranch. And yeah, they regret it now. Not because I fought dirty, but because I stood firm, stayed calm, and didn't let fear decide what was right. In the end, truth won. And out here, where the sky's wide and the land runs deep, that's the kind of justice that matters most.